Let's just quickly run through the sources. I really kind of have a bad habit of putting too many sources. This one is 73. So we're not going to finish the source, but this is going to be the same source sheet for last week. Last week I didn't have things ironed out as clearly. I ironed things out a little bit more, so that's why I made a new source sheet. But there's a lot of lack of clarity here. So number one, the famous Gemara in Sanhedrin. There's the 3 cardinal sins for which one has to give up his life. We know that already. The Rambam, I missed the source and didn't number the 3rd source. The Rambam paskins that way in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah. That's the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. The Fergila Raya Shvichas Damim and Avodas Kachavim, you have to give up your life afilu b'tzina. That's the psak of the Shulchan Aruch. Not like the Taisus Rid. The Taisus Rid ruled like Rabbi Shmuel that you don't need to give up your life for Avodah Zarah if it's b'tzina. We don't rule that way. We rule like the Shulchan Aruch. The Sefer Mitzvah says that he's over al Chilul Hashem. That's also number 5 in the reference sheet. The Rambam in Hilchos Yisodei HaTorah. Ubitol mitzvah sasei shekirus Hashem. If somebody fails to give up his life to avoid doing one of the 3 cardinal sins, he only violated Chilul Hashem. Okay? So the Igros Ma'isha number 6. We talked about this Igros Ma'isha last week. This was the story of the Jewish family that was being hid by a Gentile family during the Holocaust. And the Gentile head of the household said that either you baptize or I'm handing you over to the Nazis. So Moshe, they were not prepared to give up their life. They acted in accordance with the Taisus Rid. Let's put it that way. There's a mitzvah to diminish the severity of the sin, and they didn't give up their lives. They didn't get baptized with a priest. They got baptized with the head of the household there, and they had water poured on them. So they wrote a tshuva. Rav Moshe got the tshuva. What do they have to do tshuva for? So Rav Moshe says they didn't do avodah zarah. They have to do tshuva for not having done a kiddush Hashem. They didn't do avodah zarah because if you're forced to do avodah zarah, you didn't do avodah zarah. The only thing that you did is that you failed to do the mitzvah of kiddush Hashem. Number 7 in the reference sheet. I'm going through this quickly because it's just a review. The Noida Yehuda says the same thing. I just look at the bold section of him. Avar, if a person didn't give up his life, let's say to avoid avodah zarah, so he only failed to fulfill the mitzvah of b'chol nafshecha, but ve'ein by lav, but he didn't actually do the avodah zarah. Okay, so number 8 in the reference sheet, we have a very strong difficulty. Nevad, an animal was worshipped as an avodah zarah. I used to think that the cows in India were worshipped until somebody here corrected me. I don't think he's here. Remember, somebody corrected me here, and he said that in India they don't. Well, maybe it was you. Harry, they don't actually worship the cows. The cows, you can't eat them. It's a symbol of peace or a symbol of love, but they don't actually worship the cows.
I happen to be in India, and if a cow gets into the street, everything stops.
Everything stops. But they don't actually worship the cows.
Them in a way that's certainly beyond just not eating them.
They consider it maybe, I don't know what it is, but it's not exactly.
My son has an office in India. He was there about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
They're adding another floor or something like that. So he was there looking out the window, and there's a road right in front of people, and there's a cow walking across the road. So he was shocked, so he starts videotaping.
Oh dear.
All of a sudden, this jitney, the jitney is like one of these 3 wheels with the guy sitting in the back, drives right into the cow.
Oh dear.
Jitney flipped over, the cow flipped over, the cow got back up, the dad flipped, the jitney flipped back up. I got all on video if anybody wants to see.
Okay, great. Yeah, you have to let us know how many hits it gets on YouTube.
If that's the case, things have changed since I
was I heard a talk from a student of Rabbi Mital in Alonshville.
Oh yeah, sure.
And he had just taken a trip to India. He came back, and he came to Rabbi Mital, and he said, it's so exciting. I saw Avodah Zarah Mamish.
It's Avodah Zarah.
After learning in yeshiva for so many years.
I got to see Avodah Zarah.
And he was so excited that he how excited he was that he saw Mamish.
He was able to see Mamish Avodah Zarah. It's interesting.
I don't know what it was. Maybe it was
I remember.
Else and not the cow.
But I hear that's what it said. Apparently the cows are not Avodah Zarah. But anyways, if an animal was worshipped, so you're allowed to eat the cow. There's no isser for hedyot. Balachayim don't become prohibited. The only thing that becomes prohibited to a hedyot, which means an ordinary person, it can't be carbon. It could be eaten. You can bring it to the Badatz and Lashacht, and you can make a barbecue. But it's not. You can't bring it as a carbon. To be forbidden to be asr b'hana for an ordinary person, it has to be something that changed under human hands. But a cow that never changed under human hands, same goes with a mountain or a river, whatever it is, doesn't become forbidden to Hedin. So if an animal was worshipped, you can't bring that animal as a carbon. You can't.
Similar to the Mechir Kalev.
The Mechir Kalev is something that was bartered for a dog. And then the other thing that the Torah forbade is an etnan. An etnan is payment for a prostitute. I must have mentioned here what the Ramban says about this, no? Remember what I mentioned? The Ramban had a lot of disputations with the Christians. So one of the things he pointed out is how corrupt the church is. They incentivize genocide because the medieval kings would do whatever they want. Orgies of incest, and they'd torture the cardinals, and they'd go do genocide. And then you go to the church, okay, the church, that'll cost you this, we'll send you the bill, pay us, and then you have a dispensation. So he says that's what the Torah forbade the etnan. You give the prostitute used to have a guilty conscience from time to time. She says, it's fine, I'll just take the animal, bring it as a carbon, then I'm off the hook. That incentivizes the sin. So therefore the Torah said, don't take a esnan. Don't take an animal that was used for payment for a prostitute. Okay, that's agav. So you can't bring a nevad, an animal that was worshipped as a carbon. So Rav Zera, the second line, number 8, says, why not? Einus Rachmana Patre. Why not? So the Gemara says, that means bein b'shayig, bein b'mezid, bein b'aynis. Even if a guy, let's say, put a gun to a Jew's head and said, you bow to Betty the cow. Okay, if you don't bow to Betty the cow, I'm going to kill you. So he didn't want to lose his life, so he bowed to Betty the cow. He should have given up his life. He didn't. He wanted to live. He didn't withstand the nisai and the test, so he bowed to the cow. So this cow was now this cow is now nevid. You can't bring this cow as a carbon in the Beis HaMikdash. Asks Rav Zera why? It's an Einus Rachmana Patre. So Rav answers, Kasav Rachmana v'lei sachalu shem kachu dafilu ba'Einus. Okay? So loy techalu, I'm not sure if it's because there's a redundancy in the pasuk or because the pasuk doesn't specify, but Rava understands from the pasuk of Loy Techalu Shem Kachi that an animal becomes an esnan even if it was worshipped by Einus. So number 9 in the reference sheet, right, Rav Shmuel Rozovsky, the Rosh Hashiva of Panovich, he says he doesn't understand. You told me, that's what really the Gemara was very clear in Sanhedrin Shamach Aleph, that was the psak of the Rambam, that if a Jew has a gun put to his head, and the guy says, you bow to the idol, so the Jew has to give up his life to make a Kiddush Hashem. But if he did bow to the idol, he didn't do Avodah Zarah. That's what the way of Moshe understood the Rambam, and that's what the way of Moshe paskined for this family that was hid during the Holocaust. They don't have to do tshuva for baptizing. They don't have to do tshuva for denying the Torah Shabbat and Torah Shabbat. They have to do tshuva for having made a Chilul Hashem. That's all they need to do tshuva for. So how could you say the animal becomes a worshipped animal? Why does the animal have the status of Nevad? Right? He failed to fulfill the mitzvah of Kiddush Hashem, but he didn't worship the animal inside of his heart. Did he believe the animal had any godly powers? He didn't. So he didn't really worship the animal, so why is the animal possible to be brought in the Beis HaMikdash? Is the question clear? In other words, the failure to give up your life in order not to bow to the animal is an avera of Kiddush Hashem. It has nothing to do with Avodah Zarah. Moshe said it's not Avodah Zarah. That's the implication of the Rambam. Is the question clear? So Rav Shmuel doesn't have an answer. He leaves with the tzarachi. And last week I wanted to say, that was your suggestion, that it has a din of an oived avodah zarah because the guy was worshipping the animal. The guy used you as his proxy to worship the animal. So the animal has a din of neva not because of the Jew, but because of the guy. Because the guy used the Jew as his proxy to worship the animal. But Chaim, who's not here tonight, pointed out it's not mistaber because according to the Gemara, can't make an animal a nevad if it's not your animal. So, inasmuch that the animal doesn't belong to the guy, how could the guy confer the status of nevad to the animal if it's not the guy's animal? The Gemara says explicitly we're talking about a guy forcing a Jew to bow to his own animal. So how could the animal have the status of nevad because of the guy? The Jew needs to worship the animal in order for the animal to have the status of nevad. And the Jew wasn't really worshipping the animal. In the heart of hearts of this Jew, he didn't believe that the cow had godly powers. He wasn't really worshipping the cow. He failed to make a Kiddush Hashem, but he wasn't really worshipping the cow. So I don't have an answer to this question. This question is a tzarech iyun. There's a Brisker Rav, Velvel, the Grizz. He wants to give an answer. It's very fancy terminology, but I don't know what it means. Okay? He says it's a real brisker Torah. He says it's not the Aveira, it's not the I don't know, whatever, it's brisker Torah. Sometimes brisker Torah sounds a bit.
It's the Chetz of the Gavra.
I don't, whatever it is. You know something? I'd rather leave with a kasha than to give an answer I don't really understand. I don't think I read through his answer. I don't think it really sufficiently answered. Anyways, Rav Shmuel Rozovsky, he didn't have an answer, and neither do I. So at least I'm in good company.
Is the opposite of Kiddush Hashem Chilul Hashem?
Yeah, the opposite of Kiddush Hashem is Chilul Hashem.
In other words, if you fail to carry out something which is Kiddush Hashem, why? You're just something ordinary. I mean, why is it automatically the opposite?
You're right. Moshe Rabbeinu failed to do a Kiddush Hashem. He hit the stone. It doesn't say he did a Chilul Hashem. So you're right. A person sometimes fails to do the Kiddush Hashem, and in other times he could potentially, God forbid, do a Chilul Hashem. Yeah, so you're right. I'm just saying they are opposites, but they're not mutually exclusive. Okay? Or inclusive, whatever. Okay. So anyways, by the way, so in as much as we have, I don't have an answer for the Rambam. Rav Shmuel Rozovsky didn't have an answer, neither do I. So number 10, Lahavdil. Okay, number 10, I just now want to point out that the Rambam's position, at least the way Rav Moshe Feinstein interpreted the Rambam, it's not at all unanimous. Tosfos says, okay, number 10 in the reference sheet, that according to Rava, Avodas kachavim krinalei, when a Jew is forced to bow to the animal, not like Rav Moshe, the way he explained the Rambam, that it's just an Aver of Chilul Hashem, and according to Tosfos, it's called idol worship. That's what the Ritva explains. Number 11 in the reference sheet. He says, what's the machlokes between Rav Zer and Rava? Let's look at the third line of the Ritva. V'hainu depalag ala Rava. Rava disagreed with Rav Zera. The vadai ovid kachavim hu. V'kol haya b'chlal lo yisa'avdem. You see that? According to the Ritva and Tosfos, and the Ramban and the Maharik, I brought you all the sources. I counted 4 Rishonim that don't at all accept Rav Moshe's interpretation. Well, they didn't write it, but according to them, if a Jew has a gun to put his head, God forbid, and bows to the animal, according to these Rishonim, it actually has the status. It is considered an act of Avodah Zarah, and their proof is from this Gemara Avodah Zarah that if the animal assumes the status of Nevad, that means that there was an act of Avodah Zarah that took place.
According to the Chinuch, in Avodah Zarah, I think once you do a Maaseh, from what I remember, okay, please correct me, that he goes very much into the actual actions that have to be done, mamash, strict actions. You put it here, did he go in here and did he do this? He doesn't talk about something that's in his heart. He doesn't
talk about attention, he looks at the act. I have to see the chinuch inside, but the way you're describing it sounds like these Rishonim. Okay, so I'll have a look. But anyways, it's interesting that when Rav Moshe wrote his tshuva about this family that was hid during the Holocaust, he just invokes the Rambam, and he says, according to the Rambam, they didn't do Avodah Zarah, so therefore their tshuva should be on Chilul Hashem. Their tshuva doesn't need to be on their idol worship, because they didn't really do Avodah Zarah, but Rav Moshe Feinstein didn't point out, I'm not sure if Rav Moshe Feinstein intentionally avoided, maybe Rav Moshe Feinstein understood the grief that this family was experiencing, so he wanted to make it as easy for them as possible. So therefore, when as a concept, we make things easier for Bali Tshuva. You know the famous story we had in Bava Kama, we had the reason about it was a famous thief. Everything he owned was stolen. So he said, I'm going to do tshuva. So his wife said, you're silly, because even the belt that you're wearing isn't yours, and you're going to have to give away your belt. You're going to have to go on the street naked. You're not going to have any clothing. So he said, okay, I'm not doing tshuva. So because of that, they made a takana for all coming generations that if somebody's a famous thief and he wants to do tshuva, you don't demand it back from him. If he gives it, you give it to him, but you don't sue him in court, because otherwise people will be disincentivized to do tshuva. Or for example, if you have a beam, a guy stole a beam and you put the beam in there, takana sashavim. According to the strict law, the owner of the beam says the beam is mine, dismantle the whole house and give me back my beam. No one's going to want to do tshuva. So you see there's such a thing called takana sashavim. So I guess Rav Moshe wanted to make it easier for them to do tshuva, so he gave them the opinion of the Rambam, and he completely avoided the fact that there's the opinion of Tosfos, the Ritva, the Ramban, and the Marik, that prove it really from a Gemara Mufareshus almost, and we don't even understand how the Rambam learned this Gemara, if Rav Moshe Feinstein is correct in his interpretation of the Rambam, that according to these Rishonim, when a Jew is forced to bow, He actually did the act of avodah zarah.
It could be that with Moshe's case, in that Shiloh, because it wasn't done in a church, it was just done privately and in somebody's house.
Right, and a chanami.
Just some water.
Just water, and a chanami, he's right.
That's not, the Gemara doesn't talk about a case in the church. I mean, if somebody came over to you in the street and said, here's avodah zarah, be oived avodah zarah.
Betzina.
Betzina or b'professia.
Yeah.
It's not in the church.
It's not in a church. So it doesn't need to be in a church, but the truth is, the truth is, according to I'm not an expert in comparative religion. Some people get their doctorate in comparative religion. That's the last thing I would do. The last thing I'd get my doctorate would be comparative religion. I think my brother-in-law did it. So I don't know what the Baptist halacha, what the halacha in baptism is. I don't know if you have to do it al yedei galach or not. But the truth is, it kind of is. Before the Yom Tovim, there's some letz in America that gives halachas of Valentine's Day, halachas of Leil. You ever heard this guy?
Yeah.
A lot of people think he's funny. I think it's ridiculous. Okay, maybe some people find it funny because it's ridiculous. It sounds yeshivish. So anyways, no, the truth is the very fact that we already quoted this Ritva and Radvaz many times. You don't have to actually worship idols to fit the bill of avodah zarah. Anytime a person does something that's tantamount to saying I'm trading in my religion, or I don't accept the Torah Shebechsav, or I don't accept the Torah Shebapeh, it has the same status of idol worship. That's why the Radvaz and Ritva said you have to give up your life in order not to publicly proclaim allegiance to Islam, because Islam means that you don't believe in the Torah Shebapeh, you don't believe in the Torah Shebechsav. So the Chayr, according to these Rishonim, if let's say somebody bowed to the idol with a gun to his head, so is he going to get punished? So these Rishonim agree he's not punished, says the Ramban, for another reason. Number 14, the Torah says, V'nichrasa nefesh ahu miYisrael. That ahu, I put it in bold, is redundant. It didn't need to be said. Just say, V'nichrasa nefesh miYisrael. Why does the Torah emphasize V'nichrasa nefesh ahu? This nefesh is going to be cut off. It appears 5, 6, 7, or 8 times in the Torah. So the Safra says, V'nichrasa nefesh ahu v'lei onus, which means to say that he's not going to be subject to the punishment of idol worship because he was an onus, but according to these Rishonim, he still did the act of idol worship. So we have 3 madregas. According to the Rambam, if somebody has a gun to his head and he bows, or Moshe said he didn't even do idol worship. The Ramban and the Ritva, they hold, no, he did idol worship, but he's not going to get punished because the Torah says, we only punish people that worship idol voluntarily, willingly, not people that do idol worship under the threat of a gun to their head.
What's that last word, muta?
Muta means he was misled. He was fooled. He thought that but there is actually the sheet of the Smag. I didn't quote it. The Smag holds you get punished. The Smag holds that if somebody has a gun put to his head and he bows to the idol, you're going to kill him and base him. But it's mamash das yochad, the das of the Smag. So let me repeat myself. There's 3 madregas. According to the Rambam, if somebody bows to the idol under the threat of a gun,
kill him? You need tasra and
a chanami. So you have to have Adam that say, look, don't cave don't cave to the guy. You have a gun to your head, you have to give up your life. According to the Smag, that would be avodah zarah. I don't know how he learns the Safra. Maybe he has a different interpretation of the Safra. But just to repeat myself, there are 3 shittas in the Rishonim. According to the Rambam, if somebody bows to an idol with a gun to his head, he didn't even do avodah zarah. The only thing he did was chil Hashem. According to the Ritva, the Ramban, the Marik, and Taisvis, he did avodah zarah, but he's not going to get punished for it. According to the Smag, who's a das yachad, he'll even get punished for it. Okay, so it's 3 days.
Karis, no?
Karis, yeah.
So what do you need Asura, or what do you need anything?
That Ki'ilu Islam is avodah zarah.
No, Islam is not avodah zarah, which means that their wine. And by the way, it's an interesting point that Harry brought up. That you should, if it's your wine, you can have really an Arab waiter because he's not going. The Ram said you have to be choshesh for yain nesech. I mean, you can't drink his wine because of chasnus. We don't drink non-Jew, but it's your wine. You don't have to be choshesh. He's gonna use those wine as that wine is libation.
Wine from him also.
No, but it's his wine, and that's the Chachamim forbade stam yena mishum chasnas. The Chachamim forbade non-Jewish wine that's owned by a non-Jew, even if it's not yenism.
How about if you buy it? If you go to an Arab?
Once you can't buy. Once it belonged to a non-Jew, then it's stam yenim. It has the status of stam yenim.
How did Avad Yosef for some sort of a mixed marriage or something?
No, they're Jewish. The Karem are Jewish. They are Jewish. The Rambam was asked.
They don't believe in Torah.
Yes, and so the Rambam was asked. When we did the shir about Torah Shabbat, we saw the Rambam's tshuva. It was tshuva ein beis. The Rambam in Zaken Adar was asked, can we be mitzaref a karai to be the 10th man for Minyan. So the Rambam said no, because they don't believe in Torah. And the Rambam in another tshuva writes their din of Tinuk Shenishba. He writes the Karoim in the beginning of Chulin, the Rambam in his Parasha Mishnah, also the Rambam in Hilchos Malachim. He writes that the Karoim have a din of Tinuk Shenishba. So you won't punish them. They're kosher Jews, but they can't be mitzaref to Minyan because they don't believe in the takana of Tfilas HaTzibur.
The Golem is okay?
A Goylem, no. The Chacham Tzvi already writes that a Goylem cannot count as the 10th man. The Goylem of Prague is a fairy tale. It was invented by Rabbi Rosenberg. It's funny, the Lubavitcher Rebbe was so adamant that it's emes and that it's true, and I don't know. Lubavitcher Rebbe had his things, and he wouldn't budge from them.
Go ask him again. He changed his mind.
They said they complained to the Pnei Menachem of Gur. I think he said that they're giving aliyas to the Lubavitcher Rebbe. So they said, fine, don't give him an aliyas. Chashash Brachal Tala, give him Hagbah.
My wife stopped with the Chabad Shlicha.
Yeah.
Was learning with my wife by telephone every week. And my wife said she lit a Yortzeit life for the Rebbe.
She was upset.
And then on she didn't hear from him.
It's not Yehuda Yidel Rosenberg. He was an interesting guy. This Yehuda he had a lot of forgeries, and so he made up the story of the Goylem of Prague. There's obviously it's anybody who still believes in it is really trying to is really trying to sell the look at Brooklyn Bridge.
It's like Nachman.
Probably it's even less than Nana Nachman.
Right. No, Shnei Alignment did the whole Megillah, the whole.
Right, but the Chacham Tzvi writes that his grandfather was called the Baal Shem, but not the Baal Shem Tov from Mizrabish. It was the Baal Shem Tov of what was it called? It was also called the Baal Shem. So it was the grandfather of the Chacham Tzvi. So he said that his grandfather wrote a Goylem. It's printed in the Tshuvas of the Chacham Tzvi. He's printed the Reb Chaim of Volozhin in his introduction to the.
Couldn't find an Arab way.
I don't know. He says the Gra in Safra de Tzanusa. Safra Nusa is the Kabbalistic work of the Zohar. It's a very central Kabbalistic work in the Zohar. So the Gra wrote a commentary on the Safra de Tzanusa, and Reb Chaim Volozhin wrote an introduction to the Gra's commentary, and he says that the Gra was attempted to create a Goylem when he was 13 years old. Okay. There you go. I don't know. So it is
it's good for business.
They didn't have AI.
What?
They didn't
have AI. Steven Spielberg. I remember when I was a teenager. Steven Spielberg made a film about also about a Goylem. He was probably inspired by the morals. So, anyways, so basically, so we have three Tushitas in the Rishonim. So the truth is, now we're stuck between a rock and a hard place. We have this disagreement here. We have the Rambam who holds that if you bow to the idol under the threat of the gun, so the Rambam says you didn't do Avodah Zarah. We have a bunch of other Rishonim, Tosfos and the Ritva and the Ramban and the Marik that say you did do Avodah Zarah, but you don't get punished for, but you did Avodah Zarah. The Rambam is contradicted by the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Nun Daled, because the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Nun Daled says if somebody bows to the cow with a gun to his head, the cow has a din of Neva. That seems like a refutation against the Rambam. We don't even know how to reconcile the Rambam. The problem is that the other Rishonim cannot be reconciled with the Gemara in Sanhedrin Samach Aleph, because the Gemara in Sanhedrin Samach Aleph says that if somebody is Oived Avodah Zarah Ma'avu Miyira, Abai says he's Chayiv, Rava says he's Pater, Abai says he's Chayiv because you bowed, Rava says you're Pater because you didn't accept it as a god. Right? That's what the Gemara says. Rashi says Lav Klum Avad. Rashi says that if you did it Miyira, you're afraid of your coworker, or Ava, if somebody gave a beautiful example, he wants to marry a shiksa, and the shiksa says, well, listen, I'll marry you if you bow to my Buddha. Okay, so he's so in love, he bows to the Buddha. So he didn't really. So Rava says you didn't do Avodah Zarah, you didn't believe, you're not makabel the Buddha as a god. So how the other Rishonim going to reconcile their shita with the Gemara in Sanhedrin Samach Aleph? If I bowed to the idol because it was a gun to my head, Rava said in Sanhedrin Samach Aleph that since I didn't accept the idol, I didn't accept the cow as a god, I wasn't doing anything. Right? So we're what we're called really stuck between a rock and a hard place. The one who asks the question, number 20, is the Taisus Rid, asks the question explicitly. You want to look at number 20 in the reference sheet, you can see how the Taisus Rid asks the question. We can read it together. Eizin Nevad, what's an animal that was worshipped? Okay, so that's the Gemara in Daled that says that even if I bowed to a cow with a gun to my head, the animal is a nevad, is a worshipped animal. Kashi, how does that make sense? This should be a refutation against Rava, who said in Perak Arba Mises, that's Samach Aleph, that says that if you're Ovid Avodah Zarah Ma'ava Miyira, you didn't do anything. Right? So how are we going to? It's basically two Gemaras that are mamish on a head-on collision. The Rambam is going with the Gemara in Sanhedrin Samach Aleph. The other Rishonim are going with the Gemara in Nundalid, and we have this head-on collision. So basically, just in short, we're trying to figure out if somebody bows to a cow with a gun to say, did he do Avodah Zarah or did he not do Avodah Zarah? The Rambam said he didn't do Avodah Zarah. That's the Gemara in Sanhedrin Samach Aleph that says that if you're Ovid Miyira, lav kulam babad. That's a proof to the Rambam. The other Rishonim say he did do Avodah Zarah. That's from the Gemara in Sanhedrin in Avodah Zarah Nun Dalid. And the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Nun Dalid says that the animal that is bowed to with a gun to the person's head is a nevad. So could be the Rambam learned that it was a machaikis sugis. The Taisvis always try to reconcile contradictions. The Rambam was more inclined to believe that one sugya disagreed with another sugya. But the problem was that both of them are Rava. They're both statements of Rava. In Samach Aleph, it's Rava's statement. The Gemara in Nundalid in Avodah Zarah is Rava's statement. So we do not only have a contradiction between two sugyas. We have, unless one of them is Rabba. You never know if it's Rava because very often Rabba and Rava were mixed. Were in the shape. But I haven't seen any girsa that's Gairis Rabba. But Akapan the Taisis Arid leaves off with the Tzarachian. So Rav Shmuel Rozovsky, a little bit of a generation gap. So maybe Rava, it's usually Rava. No, but maybe in Avodah Zarah Nundalid, it's not Rava, maybe it's Rabba. Maybe it's Rabba who disagrees with Reb Zera. So in any case, right? Move on. Okay, so basically, Rav Shmuel Rozovsky brings the Gemara in Nundalid and says, how's the Rambam going to work himself with that Gemara? And he doesn't have an answer. The Taisis Rid, right, seems to have sided with the other Rishonim and brings the Gemara and said, how are they going to work out with that? And he doesn't have an answer. So this is a wonderful situation, right? We don't have any, we're left with lots of questions and no answers. Okay, now number 21, there was another Rishon that actually came a few generations before the Taisis Rid, was Rabbi Yehuda mi Paris. Okay? Rabbi Yehuda mi Paris sounds like a bit of an obscure Rishon, but he was actually a very important Rishon. He was the leading sage of the generation. He was the head of the Rabbanei Tzarfas, Chachmei Tzarfas. All of his Talmidim were major Balei Tosfos. The Arzarua, the Smag, Rabbi Yechiel mi Paris, he actually even wrote Tosasim and many Mesechtas of Shas, for example, Brachas. Okay, the truth is the scholars enjoy, the academia, they really enjoy figuring out which scholar wrote the different Tosasim on the Shas. Right. He says that's something they're not so interested in the yeshivas. In the yeshivas, they're interested in the lamdas, right? In the universities, they're more interested which scholar wrote which Tosis. But according to the scholars, the academics, Taisus Rabbi Yehuda wrote quite a few Taisus were written by Rabbi Yehuda mi Paris. One thing is Yuma, everybody knows it was the Marami Rudenberg. The Marami Rudenberg, the Rabbi of the Rosh, he wrote the Taisus on Yuma. That's been confirmed. It's important to know, by the way, because sometimes it helps shed light. If you know who wrote which Taisus, it helps you understand Sugi sometimes. So Rabbi Yehuda Paris was actually a very important Rishon. And he also asks the steer between the two sugis, and he quotes the Sefer Yereim. The Sefer Yereim says, you know something? The truth is, if you bow to the cow with a gun to your head, it's Avodah Zarah. He sides with the other Rishonim. So what did the Gemara in Sanhedrin Samach Aleph mean? What did Rava mean when he said that if you're Ovid Me'ava Me'ira, you didn't do anything? Right? Look at the bold of the Sefer Yereim. We're not talking about a cow that was once worshipped as a god. We're talking about a cow that from its very inception was nobody really believed in the cow. Nobody actually believed Betty was a god. Everybody was doing it for Yir and Ava. So we're talking about something that was never really sincerely worshipped, an animal or an item that was never sincerely worshipped. Everybody was doing it just to find favor. For Haman, as an example, Taisus says Haman was an example. Nobody ever believed that Haman was a god, except for himself. So everybody was bowing to Haman. Did anybody believe that Haman was a god? No, they were bowing to him because they were scared of Haman or they wanted to find favor in Haman's eyes. So that is not really an Avodah Zarah. But Rava never meant to say that if somebody bows to something that is already pre-established as an idol, Rava never meant to say that that's not Avodah Zarah.
It's interesting, like if you have my Rosh Yeshivas gave
hands.
To the
I had that.
to the students.
I had an interesting story today, this afternoon, I went to have a coffee and cake with my wife in Greens. You know Greens, right? The cafe that you barely find a place to sit. My wife likes it because my wife likes only the best Hashem. She likes Reuben. I eat all the Hashem, but she likes Reuben. Okay, so we go to Greens. I would prefer La Patissiere or whatever. But anyway, okay. So we went to Greens today, and there was an old lady with her non-Jewish caretaker. And she was so disoriented, this older woman, she a really old lady, and she was very disoriented. She was asking, where am I? Where am I? Where am I? And the aide kept on telling her, don't worry, we're okay, we're taking a taxi. Very often when you take older people, especially if they have dementia, they get very disoriented when you take them out of their natural environment. I remember I have relatives like that. So she was totally scared. She maybe had some childhood trauma. And she came to me, I was there with my wife, she says, where am I? Where am I? So I said, the aide kept on telling her, don't worry, we're okay, a taxi's coming, we're going to order a taxi for you. So she tells me, she says, please stay with me. She says, I'm scared, stay with me. Right? She says, stay with me until the taxi comes. So I told my wife, let's stay with her. She's scared, and it's totally strange, I don't know. She said, stay with me. She said, don't leave me. So I calmed her down, I said, don't worry, and she started kissing me. So I was holding. I have no problem with that. It's not derech, but she's 90 years old. She's a very old lady. My wife thought that I have to Yahar Gal Yavar. She was surprised I didn't give up. I didn't give up my life for Gila Rice. So I explained to my wife it's not derech. So she gave her hand. I shook her hand, and she kissed my hand. I have no halachic issue with it because it's mamish not derech.
You let him get away with Ashkacha and it leads to this.
But it was funny, my wife was saying, Aschi, you gotta keep a distance, she's gonna touch. It was funny, my wife is jealous, it was a 93-year-old woman. I said, come on. But anyway, so it's funny that you mentioned this, because just this today, I shook hands with a woman, okay? I hope nobody's gonna stop coming to the shir because of it. But you see,
you did a major.
That is the bigger.
That's it.
I have no havamina that I did the wrong thing because she was scared. She was disoriented. I managed to calm her down. That's a much greater mitzvah than I remember. Rabbi Aryeh Levine's grandson from Harnov. You know him, Benji Levine. Benji is a character. So Benji, I had a meal with him as a bacher. So he had great stories about his grandfather, about Yasher, and he started to list to me all the Gedolim in Yerushalayim, serious Gedolim, that used to give their hands to women if they're sure it's not derech. Now, if it's a young, attractive woman, it's much more problematic, because if she's a young, attractive woman, you can never be sure that there's no... Listen, there's chemicals in the brain that do, if it's a younger child, but if it's an older woman, and you're absolutely certain that you're not going to be attracted, and there's no chashash kiyuzeh that there's derech, and especially if it helps the woman calm down. I mean, I think that's what I have no doubt. I thought that was the right thing to do. But my wife is from Antwerp, and in Antwerp they're very conservative. But no, she's a good wife.
Even though you trade for her.
I crave up her kitchen. That's it. What? Yeah, we have a big problem. It's a major problem. So anyways, so first of all, the question is Rabbi, the Sefer Yereim is clear. Basically, Sefer Yereim is reinterpreting Rava. We were learning Rava, according to Rashi, that if you bow to the cow, and you're just doing it because somebody putting a gun to your head, or because the shiksa will marry you if you bear it to the cow. So we understood until that Rava holds that that's nothing. It's not avodah zarah. Says the Yereim, no. Rava will agree that's avodah. When Rava said that miyira me'ava, it means an animal that was never worshipped. Haman was never worshipped. So then he doesn't have the status of avodah zarah. But if something was already established as an avodah zarah, even Rava would agree that it's avodah zarah. Okay? So Rav Yehuda Mipariz quotes this Yereim and says, now we've answered the question. It's not like Rashi, but at least the Ramban and the Ritva and the Marik, if they learned the Sugya like the Yereim, then it would be reconciled. So the Yereim was probably a bit before the Rav Yehuda Mipariz. The Sefer Yereim was a Talmud of Rabbeinu Tam. He was considered the prized Talmud of Rabbeinu Tam. The Rabbi Yehuda Mipariz was the Talmud of the Ri Hazakin. It was a nephew of Rabbeinu Tam, so they probably overlapped each other.
Yereim wore Rashi's tefillin.
Did he?
I have no idea.
I'm very gullible, by the way. You have to be careful. If you say something, I'm going to believe you.
When you hold that for Reuben, you get no meat for you.
When you told me that the Goylem was made by the Maral Mifra, I almost believed you. So, by the way, the Taisus Rabbeinu Yehuda Mipariz, number 24, he drops a bombshell. This is a chiddush that you won't find in any other Rishon. He has another way of reconciling the animal. He says, you know when the animal has the status of Nevad? He says, if somebody verbally declared that the animal is an Avodah Zarah, right? Okay, no, I should really jump to okay, so first of all, number 24, that's just, I explained that already. Let's jump to number 26. Number 26, by the way, the Yereim is also quoted in Taisus. It's not quoted in the name of the Sefer Yereim, but the idea, the concept, is also quoted. Now look at 26. 26 is a bombshell. Okay? Number 26 in the reference sheet. We've been through a lot of concepts today, so I hope to leave the last 5 minutes to get a little bit of clarity and kind of organized, because I know there's a lot of information we said tonight. Okay, number 26, this is a bombshell. Rabbi Yehuda Mipariz, he says like this, you know why the animal has the status of never? The guy not only put a gun to the guy's head and said, bow to the cow, he said, I want you to declare allegiance to the cow. I want you to declare and say that you're accepting this cow as a god. Says Rabbi Yehuda Mipariz, then that's called Avodah Zarah, even if you don't mean it. Just the fact that a person verbalizes his allegiance to a certain Avodah Zarah, that will be defined as Avodah Zarah, even if you don't mean it inside. This is a chidush from Yehuda Mipariz that I have not found anywhere in any other Rishon, and I went on the OUisrael Chachma and all the digital libraries to see if anybody even points out this chidush from Yehuda Mipariz, and nobody points it out. When I went into the OUisrael Chachma, I quoted the 3 words from Yehuda Mipariz. It only come up in Yehuda Mipariz. That's the only place that it showed up.
In the Alexa case?
Nothing. The only place, and this is very unusual. Usually, if you have a Rishon that says something very novel, everybody jumps on it. Right? Everybody goes, hey, look, I have a mitzvah. I found something interesting that this Rishon says, and everybody tumults it. Everybody talks about it. This is a big chiddush from Yehuda Mipariz. Whether it's for Hesed or for Sinya, he says that if the guy puts a gun to my head and I bow, I didn't make any verbal.
Right.
So if in my heart I don't believe that it's an Avodah Zarah, it's not Avodah Zarah. But the moment that I make a verbal declaration that this is my God, so then it's Avodah Zarah, even if you don't mean it.
Yeah, but if it's with sin and nobody.
Huh?
If it's with sin and nobody.
Yeah, but the fact that you're verbalizing your allegiance to the animal, that in itself is a form of Avodah Zarah.
Avodah Zarah that the behemoth becomes a nevad?
That's why the behemoth becomes a nevad. That's what Yehuda Mipariz explains.
Is it only that the behemoth becomes a nevad, but you yourself have not been over Avodah Zarah?
No.
You as well.
You have done Avodah Zarah.
If the behemoth became a nevad, it has to be a
Exactly.
The question is considered Avodah Zarah ba'inus?
You won't get punished for it because the Torah says you'll be exempt of punishment, but you really did an act of Avodah Zarah, and that's why the animal has the status of nevad.
But it's an oinus.
It's an oinus. You won't be punished, but it's real Avodah Zarah. Once you make that verbal declaration, then it's real Avodah Zarah, even if you were forced. Now, I was wondering myself. I said, where did Rabbi Yehuda Mipariz get this from? If you bow, you don't mean it, it's not Avodah Zarah. But if you make a verbal declaration, then it's Avodah Zarah even if you don't mean it. Where do you get it from?
So it's interesting that you never heard this anywhere else, is that when the question came up with Alexa, with the talking to Alexa about turning on the lights.
Right, okay, yeah.
This never showed up.
Okay, no, nobody showed up. This is...
Maybe it comes from the Egel, when they say Eile Elokecha.
Oh, so you're right. You're absolutely right. The Bavli learns, the Sanhedrin Samach says, how do we know that if somebody says Eliat, if somebody says to the Avodah Zarah, you're my God, how do we know that it's Avodah Zarah? So the Gemara, the Bavli says, because we are makish, bowing with verbal declaration, and it's learned from the Egel.
But they're Pevali, but we're shoving.
They're Pevali, but we're shoving. Adar, the Bavli made it more difficult for me on Yehuda Mipariz, because the Bavli compares bowing with verbal declaration, and it learns it from the pasuk that you mentioned, from the Egel. So I said, why do we make a distinction? Where did Rabbi Yehuda Mipariz get this from? That if you bow and you don't mean it, it's not Avodah Zarah. But if you make a verbal declaration, then it's Avodah Zarah, even if you don't mean it.
If you make a statement, what's called nidre?
So that's neder. You're right. When it comes to neder, we have a Mishnah in Trumais and the Gemara in Avodah Zarah Chavav that say you have to have piv Adam teaches us that you have to have piv v'libay shavin. If you make a neder, you really have to mean it. But when it comes to Avodah Zarah, you don't have to have piv v'libay shavin. Where'd he get it from? So I think that his source was number 27 is the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi has a different source than the Babli. How do we know that saying "You're my God" is a form of Avodah Zarah? It says the Yerushalmi, Nemer kan amira v'nemer amira b'meisis. A meisis is somebody who tries to convince his friend to serve Avodah Zarah. So ma amira ha'amura b'meisis asa ba'amira kamaisa af amira ha'amura kan asa amira b'maisa. Which means to say, the verbal form of Avodah Zarah is learned from meisis. So I think maybe that's the source. If let's say I tried to convince somebody to worship Avodah Zarah, and I'm meisis, I lure him into Avodah Zarah, but I don't mean it. I'm an actor. Okay, Begin once told Reagan. He says, whenever I watch you, I'm not sure if you're still an actor or if you're not. So Reagan said, "Me too." Right? So that seems to say actors are pretty good at being. We have Reagan and we have in Ukraine. What's his name? Anyways, Zelensky. So it seems to say that the actors have a good knack at being politicians. But in any case. So we learn. So if somebody's just acting, and he lures his friend into Avodah Zarah, you don't need piv v'livay shavin when it comes to mesis. So maybe that's Yehuda Miparis' source. But if the whole way we know that you can do a form of verbal Avodah Zarah, it's learned from mesis. Just as by mesis you don't need piv v'livay shavin, maybe that's why when it comes to verbal Avodah Zarah you don't need to really mean it. Yeah.
You need to say the words Shema Yisrael.
And you have to mean it.
There would be a difference if I'm not that convinced in my heart, but I say the words. No, Shema Yisrael means you have to really say it sincerely. If you have Shema Yisrael has to come with sincerity.
You don't have kavanah.
If you don't have kavanah, it's not. So, anyways, I just finish off. We finished off. So, why is this so relevant? I gave this huge introduction to the topic of denying your Jewish identity. The Rosh says that if you say that I'm an Oived Kachavim, even if you don't mean it, the Rosh says you're not allowed to do this. Yaharg Val Yavar. And when I saw the Rosh, I said, "What's the Rosh talking about? I'm afraid of being killed. I don't want to be beaten up on the university campus. I don't want the Palestinians on the university to beat me and kill me." Comes the Rosh. We'll see it next year. The Rosh says, "No, you can't say I'm an Oived Kachavim. That's Yaharg Val Yavar." Where do you get it from? And this Rosh, when I saw it, didn't make any sense to me. What makes things worse is that the Rosh is Kapaskin and Shulchan Aruch and Kufim and Zayin. I think maybe the Rosh is like Rav Yehuda Miparis. Rav Yehuda Miparis said that when you say something, when you do verbal avodah zarah, you don't really need to mean it. So I think the Rosh says the same. If you say I'm a heathen, I'm a Christian, I'm a Muslim, and you don't mean it inside. Could be the Rosh holds, even if you say Oived Kachavim, I think that maybe the sheet of the Rosh is based on this Yehuda Miparis. So that's why the whole introduction, this whole section was just to get me to this Yehuda Miparis as an introduction to the Chidush of the Rosh, that just by verbally declaring that I don't have to do mitzvahs, I don't have to do. We'll see.
Verbalizing something, you make it real.
That's what the Yehuda Miparis, by verbalizing, you can make it, even if you don't mean it. Even if you don't mean it. I'll just give a quick biographical sketch. I just find this interesting. Some people get such a kick out of seeing mistakes that a chayim make. Okay, there was a guy who wrote a sefer, all the mistakes that all the chayim make. Some people enjoy it. So if people are going to enjoy it, I'll give them some. So the Chida number because the Chida number 32 in Shem Gedolim, he said that he theorizes that Rav Yehuda Miparis is Rav Yehuda Chassid. Okay. Now, the reason what led him to believe that was because they were both Rabbeim of the Or Zarua. But the truth is, they're not the same person. Number 31, the Or Zarua quotes his Rebbe Rabbein Yehuda Bar Yitzchak, Hanikra Sir Leon. And maybe he had some connection to the government. His name was Sir. Right? Maybe he came from the city of Leon and he was named Sir Leon. I don't know. But Rabbi Yehuda Chassid's father was Rabbi Shmuel HaChassid. And Rabbi Yehuda Miparis they died in different years. They were different people. Rabbi Yehuda Chassid lived in Germany. Rabbi Yehuda Miparis lived in France. So I don't know why the Chida made this mistake. The Shem Gedolim was quite well researched, but somehow Chida mixed them up. But he was a very important Rishon. He was the Rebbeim of the Arzur. The truth is, the Arzur was a Talmud both of Rav Yehuda Miparis and also a Talmud of Rav Yehuda Chassid. So that's what misled the Chida. But anyways, do your research, they're not the same person. So anyway, so basically, I'll just want to make a bit of a summary. What we see now is that a person has to give up his life not to be Oived Avodah Zarah. What if somebody did do Avodah Zarah with the threat of a gun to his head? So we said that three shittas in the Rishayim, according to the Rambam, and that's Rav Moshe Feinstein Paskin, you didn't do Avodah Zarah at all. There's no Avodah Zarah whatsoever. According to the Ramban, the Ritva, the Taisus Rid, the Maurik, according to most Taisvis, you did Avodah Zarah, but you're exempt of a punishment. Now the question is that why? So the difficulty is that how could you, if you bow to the animal with a gun to your head, you didn't mean it. So why should that be defined as avodah zarah? So we saw the Uraim. The Uraim said no, you don't have to mean it. When the Gemara in Sanhedrin Samachalev said Ovid Miyar Me'ava, he was talking about something that was never accepted as a god, something that was always worshipped, like Haman. But we have this Chiddush of Yehuda Miparis, that when it comes to verbal Avodah Zarah, you don't need to mean what you say. When you bow, if you want it to be defined as Avodah Zarah, then you need to mean it. But if it comes to saying, when it comes to verbal Avodah Zarah, you don't have to mean it. That's a big Chiddush I haven't seen anywhere else. And I think that's an important introduction to understanding why the Rosh says that if somebody says, I'm an idol worshiper to save his life, it's something he's not allowed to do. Next week we're going to see that if you say, I'm a goy, I think it's mutter. Nobody makes this thing, because goy could also mean goy kadosh. And we'll see that a verbal avodah zarah is only when the statement is unequivocal.
There's an in the Torah to go article that you have to deceive them.
Oh, so you saw the article. So the truth is, nobody appreciates. People think there's a machlokes between the Rosh and the Arzarua. We'll see another Arzarua next week. Arzarua said you're allowed to say I'm a goy. The Rosh said you're not allowed to say. But if you look carefully, the Rosh said you're not allowed to say I'm an oivet kachavim. The Arzarua said you're allowed to say I'm not a goy. I am a goy. So they said there's a machlokes between the Rosh and the Arzarua and the Shulchan Aruch of the Rosh. I hold no. You're allowed to say I'm a goy if your kavanah is I'm a goy kadosh.
What if you say I'm not a Jew?
Huh? So you don't say I'm not a Jew. So you have to be. So we have to be prepared, right? When before we go to Cambridge or Oxford, Harvard, we have to know what.
The way the guy is asking the question is, if you're a Jew, is you're a Jew culturally, societally,
so you can
but
say
not
you
necessarily religious.
So you say no. Say I'm an American. I'm just an American. I'm just a Canadian. Yeah, I'm just an American. I'm not a American.
You said that in Canada, the Jew said I'm a Jewish Canadian.
He says I'm first a Canadian. Say I'm a Canadian. No, I'm just a regular Canadian. You can say I'm only a Canadian. I'm a Canadian. I'm American. Huh?
Canadian's enough to get you killed in a lot of places.
I'm a Canadian. So basically, if you say I'm a goy, he doesn't know what goy means. But if you say I'm a goy and your kavanah is I'm a goy kadosh, so then it's okay. You can't say I'm an ovid kachavim, but that's next week. Anyways, thank you very much. I'm sorry for going a little over time. Okay.